Hello and welcome again to Charles Kelly Money Tips. Hope you're having a great day. Hi to everyone on Facebook Live and hello to my podcast listeners, which you can find at moneytipsdaily.com or on iTunes, Stitcher, etc. Now today there's been a report out that British household debt has reached record level, and it's the same thing is happening in America. They're reaching record levels. This is despite high employment levels, low taxes and historically low interest rates. Now in the UK, the TUC has called for higher wages, high pay, more pay rises to solve the problem. But we know that this is not always the answer. You know, if you can't manage a small amount of money, the chances are you'll not be able to manage a larger sum. You know, unless you change your habits, then that bonus or that pay rise will just be blown on more stuff, wouldn't it? And just be blown on that second or third holiday. You know, before you've even had it, you'll be thinking, let's blow it, let's spend it. So you've got to be able to change your habits. Now, I cover a lot of this in my book on money. Money Can Buy You Happiness, and I'm also writing a new book on debt. But what I'm going to give you today is a free system that I'm going to put in the new book. But I'm going to give this book to you now. I'm going to give you this system now, which is called my M.A.N.A.G.E debt system, which are 10 tips to get you out of debt and consumer debt in particular for good. Okay, so get a pen and paper and start writing this down. So M stands for make a list. Now make a list and prioritise your debts in order of importance, and look at the cost of, say, the service in the debt, which is the one that's costing you the most. Obvious priorities though are things like keeping a roof over your head and maintaining power supplies. So you don't want to be not paying your rent or your mortgage or your power supplies, but paying somebody who's just shouting the loudest. Sometimes people will pay someone that's calling them up saying when you're going to pay, but that might not be the priority debt. You've got to consider the roof over your head, your heat, your light, and your power, etc. So look at the cost of the loans, particularly things like credit cards, the highest interest rate, particularly things like payday loans, which can be costing you a fortune. Now, clearing the high cost debts will give you breathing space to pay off other debts faster and saving money on the interest, of course. But make a plan now to start paying off your debts and stick to it. Start clearing the expensive debt like credit cards, payday loans. But first, you've got to really make a plan. It's not just a question of right, let's quickly pay that, let's quickly that, or always sort of firefighting and reacting. Make a list. List them all out so that you say, right, there's the spreadsheet. This is what I owe here. This is how much I owe. This is how much that I pay. So when you see it, you can visualize it and see it there. You're much more likely to come up with a solution. Say, I know what I can do about that. Some loans might, you might be able to extend some loans to make them cheaper or whatever. And this is the first step in making. By making a list of all your debts, you will make believe me, a huge difference. Okay, the A stands for ACTS, non-essential outgoings. Okay, go through your standing orders and direct debits. This is really important. If you've got a bank account and, I'm talking about in the UK now, you can go down to your bank and say, look, where are my list of my standing orders? Or you can do it online if you bank online. And then look down and see. And, you might find, what am I paying this for? I once had 2 gym memberships on the go and it was ridiculous and I was hardly going to them. So I've rationalised that. I cut them out. I've now moved to an actual cheaper gym, which is nearer to where I live, and I go to that regularly now. So you can come up with all sorts of things. Sometimes stuff can be coming out of your bank account and your card. I had one company who deducted money from my card. It was via the mobile phone, actually. That it's very easy to get into mobile phone payments, regular payments. And they apologised and then sent me back nearly a year's payment. It wasn't a lot of money, but I spotted it on my mobile phone. But what the hell is that? And they just done it by mistake. They didn't apologise. They didn't offer me any compensation, but at least I stopped the rot. So make a list of those non-essential outgoings, things that you don't really need. The Sky TV. Could you, if you can't afford the gym, don't go. Just exercise at home. Get some weights down at, buy some second-hand weights and stuff, or just go walking. Do something. But you've got to cut. When times are tough, you've got to be ruthless and say, look, if I don't need this, I've got to cut it out. Okay, the N stands for never pay the minimum amount on your credit card, the minimum balance. You know, when you sign up for a credit card, they say, would you like to pay the whole balance or the minimum, right? Now, the minimum balance used to be 5%. It's now only around 2% or 3%. So you can imagine you're paying 16%, 18% on these credit cards, and you're just paying off a couple of percent of the balance. It could take years, in some cases 15 years, to pay off some credit cards by just paying the minimum. Now, in that time, you're going to be paying a fortune in interest rates. So never settle for the minimum. Now, you might not be able to pay the whole balance, because some cards will say, would you like to just pay the complete balance off every month? Okay, you might not be able to do that, but you can certainly say to the bank, I want to pay, instead of the minimum balance, which might be £20 a month, you can say, I want to pay £50 a month. Some credit cards will do that for you. If you can't get that done, then pay your £20 minimum balance, but go into the bank or on the phone, make a manual payment, or through your online banking, make a manual payment to clear it off quicker by increasing your payment every month. It does make a huge difference. And right, so we've got M-A-N and then A, apply for a balance transfer card. Now, okay, this might seem a short-term measure, but by transferring credit cards to from high interest charging to zero interest charging cards, can give you a bit of breathing space, maybe 9 months, maybe a year, sometimes up to 2 years. I've had offers come in and say, look, would you like to transfer this balance over for 2 years interest free? Okay, now watch the fees. You might pay a small fee, 2% or whatever, and that's effectively not really interest free, but it's a fee plus interest free. And then pay off that card as fast as you can. Don't just keep accumulating things like that. But it could give you that breathing space if you get one of those minimum payment, balance transfer offers. It could be a new card. It could be on your existing card, and then you find, okay, they send you an offer and you can get another card and put it all onto the zero interest card to give you breathing space, so that the interest you save you can then use to clear, the other more expensive debts. You've got to use this properly and write down and figure out how much you're saving, and then use that to clear your debts. Hi to everyone coming on. Hi there to Victoria there. Okay, so that's never pay the minimum balance on your credit card. Apply for a balance transfer card. Now the G stands for generate extra cash. One of the most obvious ways of reducing your debts is to increase your income. You can only go so far by cutting back. Sometimes you need to generate income. It's like a business. If a business just keeps cutting back on departments, cutting back on research and development, cutting back on this, what are they left with? They've got to eventually start doing more business. So if you think of yourself as a business, think, right, okay, how can I generate more cash? Now, you may not be in business, you might be working for somebody, but you can still think of yourself as a business. And then you could say, well, can I run a little business on the side? Could I get a part-time job? Could I get a Saturday job? Could I get anything, or could I do more hours to increase my income? Sometimes, it sounds obvious, these things, but unless you write them down and start figuring it out properly by making a plan, you won't do these things unless you actually make a plan and you make a goal and an intention to really do these things. So don't think, oh, that's obvious, anyone knows that. Do something about it, write it down. This is part of your plan, right? So G, generate extra cash. E, entitlement to benefits. This is very important. In America, they might call it welfare support. Now, check if you're entitled to any benefits or tax credits. This especially applies to single parents and people on low income, in low-paid jobs. You might be in a low-paid job where you are entitled to some sort of in benefits or help with your rent, your mortgage, or whatever. But make sure you get those, because you might say, oh, I'm not the type of person that takes benefits. Don't be too proud. Sometimes you need a bit of help, and it could get you through a difficult period. I mean, one benefit or one tax benefit break could make a huge difference to your finances. It could save you hundreds of pounds a month, and that could be the difference between, having nothing left at the end of the month to having a little bit of money left that you can use to clear your debts. So find out more from your government website or your local citizens advice office if you live in the UK. So that's E. And then D, don't ignore bills or demands. This is really important. Check if, never ignore a bill or a red letter or a demand or any letter from a debt collector or bailiff, especially a court letter. if you get a court letter and you ignore it, then you're going to find that you will actually end up getting a county court judgment, which can blight your credit record for up to 6 years. And also, if you ignore the credit card companies, they can put you in default, and a default is a bit like a judgment, but without having to go to court. So if you ignore the credit card and say, look, unless you get the final letter, it says, look, unless you pay this balance off, you will be in default. And when you're in default, they can press a button and you will have a default registered on your credit file for up to 6 years. And the same thing as if you get a court letter. I've been involved in court cases for people, and some people just ignore a court letter. They get to say they can't open it. I can't even look at it. But you have to. If you can't do it, get someone else to come around and do it for you. And it's amazing when you go to a county court how many people don't turn up, despite having maybe 3 or 4 warnings, and then the judgment is registered against them by default because they haven't even bothered to turn up or haven't, just couldn't face it. But you can't bury your head in the sand and hope it's all going to go away. If you ignore things and bailiff things, they'll come around your house or knock on your door if you don't ring them up and do something about it. And every time they come around your house, or every time a sheriff or a bailiff comes around, it adds hundreds of pounds to your bill. A single parking ticket, for £50 can end up £3,000 or £4,000 if you don't deal with it and do something about it. Because by the time they've come out for you and they've taken goods away and all the rest, it can amount literally to thousands of pounds if you don't do something about it. So never ignore bills. Don't ignore bills. Don't ignore demands, court letters, etc. Okay, the E now. We're into the D.E.B.T. The E stands for enter into an arrangement. Consider this. Now, this is a big step, but consider entering into an arrangement with your creditors. Speak to your creditors. If you're really at your wit's end, you can't afford this. You just cannot manage all of these bills and all these debts. Rather than saying, I'll bury my head in the sand or just let them come and take my house away. Or in some cases, people have committed suicide over debts. And imagine that, when perhaps all they needed to do was speak to the creditors and say, look, I can't afford to pay this. And it's amazing how many times they might say, what can you afford? We'll spread it. We'll do something about this. Some will be helpful. Now, when I say enter into an arrangement, this is a bit more of a formal situation where you might enter into a debt management plan, right? You might say, I'm going to get a company or an advisor to get into a debt management plan where you will formally agree to pay off a percentage of your debt, maybe not all of your debt, over a period of time. And once that happens, they're not going to keep hounding you as long as you stick to the arrangement. There are more formal arrangements like IVAs, individual voluntary arrangements, which I'll come on to in a second. Now, always take legal, professional and financial advice. Don't just listen to a salesman who rings up and says, we can clear your debts. They're just selling you a service, which can be very expensive. So talk to an advisor, talk to the citizen's advice. This is a kind of a last step, but remember that you can also just speak to your creditors and say, look, I can't afford to pay you. So what are we going to do about it? And often they'll have somebody who can talk to you. Okay, so that's that one, entering into an arrangement. But consider this as a last resort. The B then stands for be proactive and ask for help. Now this could be talking to your local citizen advice or a government office or an agency that helps with these things, or a debt counsellor, or even a relative. We all need a bit of help sometimes, but as I say, don't just try and take it all on your shoulders and get lonely or depressed about it. Don't be ashamed of it. You've got into debt, you can get out of it. This is not something that can last forever. And these arrangements I've talked about, the final step is, of course, bankruptcy. If you don't do something about these things, then you'll end up becoming bankrupt. Maybe you'll be made bankrupt, or you might just say, well, I'm going to go bankrupt and do it yourself. But that's like a very drastic step. And remember that although you can be out of bankruptcy within a few years, you can be discharged, it will always appear on your record, you're a bankrupt. Have you ever been bankrupt? You've got to put on a form, have you ever been bankrupt? Well, yes, So it's not a great thing. And I've known people to go bankrupt for £3,000. It's a silly amount to go bankrupt for, because they could have just paid that off. Why go bankrupt for £3,000? I said, why did you go bankrupt? He said, well, I told them to bankrupt me. Oh, I'm not going to pay you, bankrupt me. So they did. But who's the winner? He's not the winner. They're not the winner either, but he's not the winner. He's lost his credit rating for years. And also, if you're made bankrupt, they can go after other assets that you got, like your house. You could lose everything. So don't go. These arrangements I've been talking about are steps towards that, but they avoid the bankruptcy, which is the ultimate. Now, obviously, if you owed 50 million and you've got £50, you might have to consider going bankrupt. Maybe that would be the best thing, because you're never going to be able to pay off 50 million. So by going bankrupt, you usually wipe the slate clean. But most people don't need to get that to go that far. Okay, and the last thing, the T, is to take yourself off consumer debt for good, like taking yourself off drink or drugs. Take it off, kick the habit, right? And never borrow to buy expensive consumer items which depreciate in value. And I've said this before. Warren Buffett said that borrowing money at 16% to buy consumer items which go down in value is dumb borrowing, right? That's why he buys credit card companies that lend to people who practice dumb borrowing. In other words, he's saying, I'm buying credit card companies to lend to dumb people in many cases, right? So don't do it, and especially avoid rip-off deals like rent-to-own consumer products. There are these companies that mainly base themselves in poorer parts of the country, and they rent furniture, they rent white goods like washing machines, they rent Sony Xboxes and games consoles to people. And it might sound cheap. Oh, I can rent that for £5 a month. Yeah, but what's it going to cost you over the years? A fortune. Some of the interest rates on these things are 40%. So I would prefer to go down and get something on eBay secondhand rather than rent these new things that are shiny and new, but they're going to cost you a lot of money in the future. The old adage is, if you can't afford it, do without it. That was the old way, but modern people now say, I want it now, right? And that's wrong. We have to become, we've become too accustomed to like buy now, pay later. I want it now, and this culture of easy credit, which should just be called easy debt. When you see the sign fast credit, it's really fast debt. You'll get into debt very fast, but it will take you a long time to get out of debt. So to just watch that, and keeping up with the Joneses is another problem. Just because your friend's got a new car, a new gadget, doesn't mean you have to have it. And I mentioned a lot of this in my forthcoming book, Money Can Buy You Happiness, and in my book, actually, it's not forthcoming, it's actually a book now, but I've got a new book coming out where I'll be talking more about debt as well, and how you can use debt to your advantage rather than this kind of consumer debt. So that's the manage debt list. Make a list, axe non-essential debt, never pay the minimum balance, apply for your a minimum balance, a zero balance, a transfer card, generate extra cash, entitlement to benefits, don't ignore bills, enter into an arrangement if necessary, be proactive and ask for help, and take yourself off consumer debt for good. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 more bonus tips now, just for you, just for listening in today. 2 more bonus tips. Okay, never use these expensive payday lenders or people who knock on your door and unauthorized doorstep lenders. They're illegal, most of these type of lenders. They'll charge you a fortune, and once you get tied into these things, they can cost you a lot of money. Pawnbrokers are another one. These are last resort lenders, but they can cost you a lot of money. And second bonus tip is to start building a good credit rating by making your repayments on time. This means when you've got a credit card and it's due on the 30th of the month, don't go into the bank and pay it on the 29th and think you're going to get it on time, because it takes a few days to process it. Make sure you're paying it and the money reaches the person who you owe the money to on time every month. And the way to do that is to set up direct debits or standing orders so that you never miss a payment. Okay, and the higher your credit rating, the good thing is that you'll have access then to cheaper credit, more credit and better credit, rather than this expensive credit. Because they say the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Well, in this case it's true, because the poor end up with the most expensive credit. The payday lenders and the rip-off lenders, they end up with that. So they've already got very little money, and that even what they've got is taken away from them by these expensive loans. Whereas the wealthy can go out. I was with a broker today. I can borrow hundreds of thousands of pounds at 1.64% per annum okay, 1.6.4%. I can borrow £200,000. It will cost me about £300 a month. And that's amazing. Whereas, you want to go and buy a car, it can cost you 25 or 30%. So by having a good credit rating, you can help yourself in the future and use debt to your advantage, which I talk about in my new book. So hi to everyone coming on. My word of the day, I just want to go through that now quickly. My word of the day is IVA. I mentioned that just earlier, individual voluntary arrangement. I'll just quickly explain what that is. In England and Wales, an individual voluntary arrangement is a formal alternative to avoid bankruptcy, which is, as I said, where you're completely made bankrupt. It's established under the Insolvency Act 1986 and constitutes a formal repayment proposal or an arrangement to pay creditors, and this could be unsecured credit. So you get all your creditors together, all the loans you owe, all the debts and credit card debts, and you say, well, I can only pay this amount, and some of that debt would eventually be written off. Now, it's a contractual arrangement with creditors, and it can help people in some time, but it is kind of not the last resort, but it's when you've really reached the end of your tether and you can't manage your debts, then you would have to go through this process. Is a formal arrangement. There are less formal arrangements like debt management plans, as I said. Now there is a similar thing for businesses called a company voluntary arrangement, or a CVA, and there is also for businesses going into administration. In America, it's Chapter 11. And many companies have come in and out of administration, and in America, many people have been in Chapter 11. Big airlines and even companies owned by President Donald Trump have been in Chapter 11. But they've restructured things and come out of it. You hear a lot about companies going into administration and then restructuring their debts. Even leases on their premises they can restructure in administration. Big companies, they're doing this that you'd see in the high street. So, if big companies can do it, why can't you do it? As an individual, why do you feel that shame of debt? Don't get to grips with it and start making a plan. Okay, so that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope that's been useful. And if you want a full list of this, you can find it at my website moneytipsdaily.com, which will be on there today or tomorrow. Thanks very much, and this is Charles Kelly bringing you money tips to help you save, earn, invest, accumulate, and enjoy more money.